Good evening, everybody.
Recording in progress.
Good to go? All right. I hate to repeat myself, but good evening, everybody. This is a meeting of the Programs and Services Committee. It is Thursday, February 16th. We have 2 items on our agenda tonight. First, let me introduce members of the committee who are here in the council chamber, and then I will see who is online. In the chamber, we have from Ward 3, Councillor Pam Wright. From Ward 2, President Albright. From Ward 7, Councillor Lyle Baker. My name is Josh Krinsman. I'm the chair of the committee, and I am from Ward 4. Online, members of the committee, we have from Ward 1, Councillor Maria Greenberg, and I believe from Ward 5, Councillor Bill Humphrey is here. I see we're also joined by Councillor Julian Malachy. And am I missing someone, Jacqueline? And Councillor Lucas is here as well. The first item on our agenda is item 370-22. This is a discussion on the field maintenance plan. I believe that we are joined remotely by Commissioner Nicole Banks. Commissioner Banks, I want to turn it over to you to provide an update on this item, and then we'll see if any councillors have questions.
Thank you, Chair Krinsman. Thank you to our city councilors. Good evening. My name is Nicole Banks. I'm the Commissioner of Parks, Recreation, and Culture, and I'm joined tonight by Derek Mannion, our Superintendent of Grounds Maintenance, and Luis Perez de Maurizi, our Director of Parks and Open Space. So we have been with Programs and Services several times with some updates on our field improvement plans and field maintenance plans. And we know how many people are invested and interested in us having quality playing fields here in the city. This would include our city council members, the mayor's office, our school department, our youth and adult sport groups, and our Parks and Recreation Commission. Tonight, I know we have additional members in the audience who are joining us who may not have seen some of our previous presentations to various committees and at community meetings. And so we want to be able to just give a little bit more of a overview for you this evening with that additional attendance, giving a comprehensive summary of the past, present, and future of our fields. And with that, we will be touching on our grass fields, as well as our fields capital projects, which have included lights, turf fields, grass improvements, and expansions. With that, I'm going to turn over for the beginning of our presentation to Luis.
Thank you, Commissioner Banks. Thank you all for having us. Luis Perez de Maurizi, Director of Parks and Open Space for the city. And I will first start, there we go. Start with a brief recap of how we've been listening to athletic field needs, as Commissioner Banks noted. Then Derek will touch on how we're maintaining our grass fields. We'll be discussing how we are expanding play through our capital projects. And then Commissioner Banks will lead us through some of a few points on synthetic turf. So to start, in 2020, we received a petition, the city did, from the Newton Athletic Fields Foundation with a number of topics for us to consider, evaluate, and really address. As you all may know, many of our athletic fields have had poor quality, and these are some of the points on the screen that highlight sort of the need to improve that quality, but also the need to expand play, along with more maintenance and a few other items. In addition to the Athletic Fields Foundation, through the Field Subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of the Parks and Recreation Commission, we held meetings for just over a year to discuss the needs of athletic field user groups. And some of the key findings, again, is athletic field conditions, and also enhancing and expanding field availability. On top of that, we had the high school time dismissal change, which put even more pressure on our fields and the need to get creative in terms of expanding play. And just to recap, these are our plan, goals, and objectives in how we're improving quality, quantity, and maintenance of athletic fields in Newton. And with that, I will hand it over to Derek Mannion to take us through grass field maintenance.
Thank you, Luis. Can everyone hear me? Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Banks, for the introduction. Thank you, Chairman Krinsman, ward councilors, and all Newton residents here tonight. Thanks for allowing us to present this to you this evening. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Derek Mannion. As Commissioner Banks had said, I'm the superintendent of maintenance. I've been with the city since the spring of 2003. I took over for former Superintendent Dave Mandatory. Luis, would you mind going to the next slide, please? So one of my primary duties as both the assistant and the superintendent have always been overseeing turf mowing contracts, turf management contracts, and IPM. We do right now have 7 mowing contracts within the city for 167 different locations. A general overview for these 7 contracts is that it includes all the grounds, including athletic fields, grass, meadows, cemeteries, and traffic islands. Next slide, please. Turf management has been an important topic as the last few years. We're about a year and a half into new and bigger budgets, which have helped. What you see here is Warren House and our contractor, North Turf Aerating. Some of what we do with our contractor is known as cultural practices. The most important of these is aeration, which helps remove a soil core, which helps improve aeration or the airflow, water infiltration, reduces compaction. Next is slice seeding or sodding, fertilizing, adding lime where needed, and top dressing. Top dressing is adding a specified size of and shape of sand over the top to improve ball roll, and also coordinated with aeration to help get sand down into the soil profile to help water perk through the soil profile more easily. A couple important things for mechanical aspects for fields are mowing, which we're all familiar with, and dethatching. Dethatching is kind of a vertical mowing, if you will, that helps remove turf blade tissue to help thin it out, which in essence, sometimes the more you beat turf up, the better it responds coming back. Another practice that we have been working on since the early 2020 is IPM, which is through our IPM committee, and IPM approved herbicides. Lastly, as I spoke, we're using North.
I apologize, Mr. Mannion. Do you want to just explain quickly what IPM is?
Oh,
for those who don't know.
Thank you. IPM is also known as Integrated Pest Management. It's a way of monitoring fields. You scout and look for any type of pest. It can be a weed, and there's grassy weeds. There are broadleaf weeds. There's insects. There's quite a lot of different insects, and there's diseases. Those are your major ones. You can also get down to rodents, skunks, things of that nature. So what we do is we monitor and we photograph and document the fields throughout the growing season, which is from about May through October. We use a grid system to do this. And in the fall, after the growing season, we will actually physically count the weeds in our quadrants to come up with a the number of pests, and from that pest, we may or may not exceed a predetermined pest threshold. Is that sufficient?
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. No, thank you. I appreciate that. As I was saying, we have North Turf as one of our contractors and Tom Irwin Advisors as a consultant. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a closer look at athletic turf management over the last few years, going back to fiscal year 19, our operating budget at this time was reduced, not as robust as it is right now, $35,000 per year, per fiscal year. With that, we were able to get to about 8 locations per fiscal year, and the total acres that we were able to maintain through that money was about 22. You can see as we get into fiscal year 20 and 21, the amount increased to $75,000. And with that, we are able to increase the number of areas, the number of locations, almost doubled, and reaching to a maximum of 40 acres in fiscal year 21. Fiscal year 22 was a huge difference. Having $250,000 to work on turf was, as soon as I heard that, I called my contractor and I made sure that he was going to be ready. I said, we've got a lot more money and we need you to make sure that you've got time on the books for us to come in. So he was more than happy to do that. So we were able to get to 16 locations and really increase the amount of acreage to 54. The present fiscal year, which we are in now, we are at $300,000 in our operating budget, and we were almost at 70 acres being able to maintain and still increasing our locations up to 18. So if we're going from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 23, we're seeing 125% increase in the number of locations maintained, over 200% in the number of acres, and a staggering 757% increase in the budget. Next slide, please. So a lot of what we've all seen in day-to-day in our own homes and even in our jobs is materials and services increases. One aspect for us is grass seed. We buy a lot through our contractor. They install it through slice seeding. We buy a lot and we install it also. This is a timeline of 33 months. I apologize that the 33 is on 2 different lines there. So over 33 months, we saw an increase go from $1.17 a pound to $3.18 a pound, which is almost, it's $2.01. Well, we actually had 172% increase just in grass seed alone. That transmitted through fertilizer also, but just for tonight, I'm showing you what we were looking at with perennial ryegrass. Next slide, please. Looking at some of the cultural practices, as I was talking about earlier, on a contractual basis with North Turf, over the last 3 fiscal years, we can really see what that services increases has been like. It's gone from $200 an acre, well, stayed at $200 through the 3 fiscal years, but grass seed really took a jump. It went from $395 to $1,000 per acre, which is staggering. So, fertilizer did the same, $195 to $250. Top dressing kind of stayed the same. Sand did not generate as much of a cost increase, but overall, we see a 43% increase in services through our contract. Next slide, please. One thing I want to focus on, as you all know, in calendar year 2021 was arguably the wettest summer and fall on record, or in 100 years. And then 2022 was the exact opposite. It was the hottest, driest summer on record in 100 years. That really allowed us to see where we had some gaps with irrigation. gaps that were hidden by the previous year because it was so wet. This is a snapshot of what we spent so far in this fiscal year on irrigation repairs, 44,000, and well repairs, 50,000. So almost $95,000 between the two. Next slide, please. So this, I won't take credit for putting this slide together, but I am in it. So thank you to the author of it. This is Lower Falls, and some of you on here tonight might be familiar with it. This was one of the areas where we had a well issue. We were able to fix the well. It was right around September 1st. Just before the well was fixed, we went in with a high-grade fertilizer, fertilized the whole area at Lower Falls. We dethatched it, and then we slice seeded it in two directions, and we just started to irrigate it. The result after about 30 days, top left and then bottom right, is amazing. And the bottom left picture shows the grid system that myself and Rob use when we go out and we monitor our athletic fields. That has 25 quadrants in it. It's a 2-foot by 2-foot tool that we use. So we will take 30 pictures per location and generate 750 quadrants and literally count all the grassy weeds in 750 quadrants, and then count all the broadleaf weeds in 750 quadrants. So I'm fairly familiar with that tool. Next slide, please. So this is my final slide, but it provides a great snapshot of a before and after calendar year 2022. These are our IPM results at Newton North High School. After our 2021 pictures were reviewed in the fall of 21, we saw almost every single quadrant, 98 or 99% of the quadrants had either broadleaf and or grassy weeds in them. It was a staggering amount of weed growth in there. We went in, we sprayed the field, and the results are perfect. There's absolutely no weeds in that. Will there be weeds again? Of course. We get weeds from wear and tear on grass. Someone walks in a weed seed, it blows in through the wind. But the results from this were tremendous. So it's this type of tool, along with all the other tools that we've mentioned, our aeration, our slice seeding, our fertilizing, our top dressing, having wells that work, all of those things are going to help get us to the next level with our fields, particularly the budget. That's what's leading this, is that $250,000 last fiscal year and that $300,000 this year. And again, we're only a year and a half into those bigger budgets, so I'm hoping that we're going to see an upward trend continue like this. I'm wondering if there's any questions on this piece now, or is it better to hold off to the end, Luis? So
perhaps, Derek, we go through the entire slide, and then folks can ask questions, so we can just jump back to the presentation. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you, Derek. So as you all have heard or seen, or both, Derek and his crew are getting literally into the weeds. So now I'm going to take us way up to the 5,000 foot view and just kind of talk about the City of Newton inventory of open space and public lands, as well as participation and some trends that we're seeing. So overall, the City of Newton has 2,500 acres of open space. 1,500 of those are public. So there is 62% of all open space in Newton is dedicated to the public sector, which is fantastic. One of the things that we looked at, as well as at a high level, again, Derek doing his his treatments and management of grass turfs, which is improving the quality. Well, we, as part of the capital projects and some of the discussions we've had, we needed to look at, well, how do we expand play? And some of the key findings here, and you'll see some of these maps derived from the open space and recreation plan, it's essentially Newton is fully built out, predominantly residential. You know, the parcels, as you can see in the map in the center and to the right, you know, the parcels are very irregular. 38% of the city is covered by tree canopy, and these open spaces house a lot of that tree canopy, along with the street trees as well. You know, being a fully built out city, we really needed to get creative as to how to expand play. So here's sort of a breakdown, you know, a closer look at our facilities. So out of those 1,500 public parcel acres, 476 include parcels that have athletic fields, which is roughly 31%. Out of that 476, 118 acres are available for athletic fields, which then brings us to only 8% of that 1,500 acres is athletic field use. And within that 8%, we can break it up into you know, higher level numbers. 25% of park and school lands are allocated toward fields. The rest of the 75% of those lands are covered by buildings, wooded areas, courts, and other uses. In terms of participation, Newton has quite a bit of athletes. K through 12 athletics make up approximately 11% of Newton's overall population, and the participation is growing. And it is growing significantly in the multi-purpose sports. And here's another quick breakdown of how these fields are permitted and sort of the percentage. So some of our goals were also to kind of try to equalize the permitting hours and be able to provide that expanded use. Here, just a recap, I kind of touched on a lot of these here. This will be posted later on so folks can take a look at their own leisure in closer detail. But in general, we saw that demand for fields were driven by quality of play surface, irrigation, and access to parking. We also found through all of this analysis and conversations that we needed to better meet the needs of multi-purpose sports. We really needed to take a data-driven approach and strategically reduce underutilized amenities such as certain ball fields, and really taking, again, that vertical or sort of creative approach to expanding multi-purpose field offerings. You know, given that sprawling grass fields is not feasible in an Eastern Massachusetts community. In terms of, you know, our 5-year plan, here's sort of how we've been implementing this strategy. Again, won't go through all the points. Folks can certainly take a look at that a bit closer later on. And then here is, again, some of the prioritization criteria that we needed to develop in order to move through these projects. So no shortage of balance here in trying to expand play. Another sort of goal that an objective that we were tasked to do was really kind of expand our capabilities to manage these projects, develop processes, as well as procure on-call services for project design. And that has really helped us accelerate the way in which we manage projects. Here's an overview of the Parks and Open Space division, staff, consultants, and responsibilities. Here is a brief overview of how we assess, plan, and execute these plans. Again, feel free to follow up on these topics in more detail later on. Here's just a snapshot of the community engagement process that we've gone through to develop and continue evolving with this plan. So in terms of play expansion, we found lights to be very important. We've been able to fund a few lighting projects focusing on the existing synthetic turf fields as those can tolerate the intensive or high intensive use of the high schools. We are also looking at increasing the availability of those kinds of fields, as well as improve irrigation and grass turf at unirrigated, lower quality fields, again, to sort of improve that quality. And then, of course, remove underutilized ball diamonds when possible. And I see there's a typo, so my apologies for that one. Again, talking about lights, at synthetic turf fields, these give us roughly 500 more hours of play at these fields annually. And then there's a breakdown, as you can see, per evening, per season, how many more hours of play we're able to get on these fields just by adding lights. Here's a brief overview, geographically speaking, of how we're expanding play through lighting. A brief overview, geographically speaking, on how we're expanding availability of synthetic turf. And here's sort of the aerials or drone imagery of the location. So 2 of them are currently turf, and we're working on replacing those as they are past end of life and very, very close to significant failure. In terms of capital improvements, we have a ton of different goals and objectives that I won't go in detail here, but we're really trying to implement smart technology, replace end-of-life sports lighting, expand those sports lighting opportunities, and improve the overall quantity of fields available. Just to follow through with the overall plan, just a highlight of what we have in the works. Highlighted in green on the right here are the 2 lighting projects that are completed and sort of where we are in terms of progress on some of the other capital projects. So here's just a money shot of the lights and how well these systems are designed so that they can meet the concerns or help mitigate the concerns of neighbors while providing that additional use on these fields. This is Newton North, soon to be lighted through the spring and summer of this year. Albemarle is one of the projects that we have in the pipeline as well. And this one is a project that helps expand multi-purpose use, sort of reconfigures the site. And while we're at it, we're replacing end-of-life sports lighting and expanding to certain fields within the park. Here's sort of the overall lighting scheme that we're looking at over there. Burrs School is a perfect example of expanding grass fields. There's a large swath of land, but that swath of land only covers 7v7 field, which is a very small field for this area of land. So the project looks to level the field, no pun, and be able to provide multi-purpose fields that meet regulation size for 11v11s and a combination of smaller fields on the side, and there's a whole host of ways that we can shift these fields as the seasons progress. And here's another piece showing that sort of flexibility within this expanded large grass area. Another project is McGrath. You know, this is a clear indication of sort of the irregular parcels. We have this sort of U-shaped park and field area. And as you can see in this aerial, this is one where the softball diamonds were highly underutilized. And we saw a lot of opportunity by removing those ball fields and be able to expand rectangular field space. One of the issues that we're dealing with at McGrath is the current conditions don't allow for appropriate run-out zones. So this plan is also looking at providing that, which the ball fields being removed help in that regard. And then overall, this is sort of geographically speaking, sort of the spread of both improving quantity and quality of our fields. So superimposed for Derek's grass maintenance sites, along with the capital projects that are working to expand usable fields in the city. And then this slide here touches on sort of a rough schedule. We are looking to request a significant amount of funds toward these capital projects from the Community Preservation Committee, roughly in the lines of 8 to 9 million to cover a series of these grass field projects, and Albemarle, which is more of a park redevelopment project. In terms of next step, as noted, we'll be going to the CPC for funding. We'll continue working through the plans to get them to shovel-ready status. And our goal is to begin construction on one of these in the fall of 2023, pending, obviously, funding successes there. And then in terms of improving grass field maintenance, Derek will continue to do his thing. We'll continue to evaluate and analyze field usage data and continue evaluating and prioritizing projects for the next 5 years. We do see this sort of as a recurring 5-year plan. And with that, I will hand it over to Commissioner Banks.
Thank you so much, Luis. So I do want to start off by great presentations. I want to thank Derek and his team. He mentioned Rob in some of his speaking points. Rob McClary is our Assistant Superintendent of Grounds and Grounds Maintenance. It is out there in these fields day in and day out. The fields have just been dramatically improved, putting to good use these funds that we have seen over the last couple of years. And we do have funds in the override request, which would continue to support the aspects of that division in our department. And I also a big thank you to you, Luis, and Greg Mellett, who is our Assistant Director of Parks and Open Space. This has really been an incredible amount of work for these projects, both in project planning, but also working really closely with our stakeholder groups, hosting community meetings, really listening on what those needs are to make sure things get incorporated into each and every one of these projects. So we have now talked about how we are improving our existing fields, and we are looking to expand to areas providing more quality play. There's one additional component that helps our grass fields, and that is having turf fields in our inventory. We did talk a bit about this at the last month's Programs and Services meeting, if anybody wants to watch back to that video. But I did want to go over some of the speaking points here tonight to highlight that for some who might be joining us this evening. So the synthetic turf benefits, some of these include that they can be used year round. We have groups that are using our fields now. I think we hit 60 degrees today. So I'm guessing you would have seen some people out on the fields today. They also serve us in the early spring when grass fields are often having wet conditions or snow on them still in some years. And they're really serving all 4 seasons. The turf fields can handle unlimited use. So in the busiest times, we can put as many athletes as our groups would like out on these fields at a time. So it wouldn't be unusual to see 2 different groups of, maybe a freshman and a JV teams playing on a turf field at once, putting many more players on them. These fields can be used during the rain. So you can play on them while it's raining. You can play on them if it has been raining for 3 days. And on the grass fields, we're waiting for those to dry out before we can play back out there. The ability of our schools, who are each organizing more than 100 games per season per school, for all of their teams to not have to reschedule when there's makeups and rainouts is a huge advantage. If the grass field was closed for a week, that would just be so impactful to those schedules and would impact many uses throughout the days. The number of activities that we can put on each of these fields is about triple of what we would put on a grass field. So one synthetic field is providing an amount of use that is more than just one single field to one single field. And of course, the artificial turf fields are an important part of our overall field inventory because they reduce the overuse on grass fields. So we're putting out those impactful type of play, the more stressors like more athletes on a field at one time, and trying to put those uses onto our synthetic turf. Next slide, please, Louise. Thank you. For the turf and lights at the high schools. So reasons why we have kind of focused on our high school campuses. When you add lights to the turf, like we have at our 2 turf fields at South, we actually just signed the contract for light installations at North. We really unlock the full potential of what the artificial turf field can provide. So they have added sports. Our schools have added sports over the years, and we've also added teams to those sports. So expansion in both of those ways. These fields are lined, and many of them are pre-lined to provide for football, soccer, lacrosse, and they can really serve all of the rectangular sports. We maximize the number of players. So again, it's not uncommon for athletic directors to put 2 full teams out practicing on a field at once. This could be multiple football teams sharing, or could even be multiple sports out on the same field using different halves of the field to practice. This again goes back to taking some of those uses off of the grass. And the other important aspect that we are focused on is trying to keep our students at their hub on site. They are reducing their travel time, and they have access to the amenities that are offered at the schools. And some of those are listed here, including locker rooms, athletic trainer, on-site parking, all of those things that they rely on during their sports practices and games. Next slide, please. Finally, we've done a little bit of comparative research here to look at some of our neighboring communities and assessing Newton against what others are seeing for their needs for synthetic turf fields. So if we are an outlier in terms of the turf fields, it's that we have less fields available per capita per student athlete than our neighboring communities that you can see that we've selected here in the greater Boston area. We have about 1.5 turf fields per high school. Of course, that's not where they're located, but you can see as you look to see how many high schools each of these communities offers where we fall. And if you look at the numbers in the last column, you will really see we're highlighting that we are more than double the next closest community in terms of how many students we have per turf field. So we are very much an outlier and having a lower number of synthetic turf fields to serve our student athletes. Our athletic directors, Pat Gonzalez at the South High School and Mike Jackson at the North High School, are doing very important work for our student athletes. What I think this graph shows is that their work is significantly harder than peer communities, in that they are trying to schedule and get all of these games and practices in without some of the advantage of having the turf fields available. This is why our department and working with the school department, why we've been focused on looking at providing access to an additional turf field for the Newton North High School. And our proposal for Albemarle includes that expansion piece. So that concludes the presentation. Chair Krinsman, we're happy to take questions. We're happy to stay around for the public hearing if you feel that you'd like us to assist in any way in answering questions. And we're very grateful that you gave us some time this evening to highlight the work that has been going into this. We have been very busy, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Banks. Appreciate the update. This is, docketed as a discussion, so if any counselors have questions, now is a good time. Definitely appreciate if you stick around. I don't know how much opportunity there will be for back and forth. It is a public hearing, but if the council wants to discuss this afterwards, after the public hearing, it would certainly be helpful. I see President Albright has her hand up. President Albright, any counselors online, please feel free to raise your electronic hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of you from Parks and Rec for that very informative presentation. I appreciate all the work it must have taken to put that together. So I had a couple of questions about the field maintenance piece. Wondering, so we're covering with the $300,000 this year. We're covering 18 acres. So how many playing fields are we not able to cover yet in this comprehensive manner that you talked about tonight?
Are you talking about within the $300,000 maintenance budget?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. I'll answer that if you don't mind, Commissioner Banks and Luis. 18 locations with a total of almost 70 acres, 69 acres. So you might have said 18 acres, but it's 18 locations and 69 acres.
Yeah, so my question was how many, it's sort of like a two-part question. How much money would it take to do everything? How many locations, how many acres are we unable to do because we don't have enough money?
I don't have that with me tonight, but I would be happy to put some effort into finding out. It depends on, the focus is always, for here tonight, I can say irrigated first, because you're most likely to see the best bang for the buck when you've got water to help grow your grass. So we're almost at about every single irrigated athletic field right now. So we're very close with what we're doing at the moment. But I can put something together that kind of references any additional locations and the acreage in them.
The fields at Burr and McGrath that you're planning on doing, that Luis showed the plans, are those two areas that you're doing now, or will they come online after you do this work?
Good question. I'll start with McGrath. I also call it Warren House. That's irrigated. That is one of the sites that we are at presently. Burr refers to Burr School. That's non-irrigated. We're strictly in a low maintenance over there at that site. We're basically mowing every other week. If we're getting an awful lot of rain like we did in 2021, we were mowing every week.
And if I may add, that project will be adding irrigation, so we can see Burr School fields getting into this list shortly after it's built. So
you'll need that $300,000 to be increased next year in order to keep growing to the fields that you're continuing to irrigate, I would think.
President
Yes.
Albright, if I could just mention, one of the things, if you've seen us presenting on different evenings, one of the things our department has been presenting on recently is our override request. And those funds are necessary as part of the overall maintenance plan, and as well as for taking care of the additional improved assets that we'd be bringing online. So when you talk about a new field at Burr Elementary, and that is going to be, a new water source, a new well, new irrigation, improved athletic fields that would then be cared for at the higher level of premier field maintenance. Those override funds are very, very important for us to be able to do that. And they would also go into continuing our maintenance program and expanding that to several other sites. So our override, if you take out the 500,000 that is set aside for the trees and for our forestry division, we have $1 million requested in that override. Over 500,000 of that would be additional funds. If it passed and we were to add those into our maintenance budget, those would contribute toward the fields and the park improvement projects. Other funds that are in that category is the courts and playgrounds, putting together a maintenance plan and ongoing proactive maintenance for athletic courts and playgrounds. So hope that helps answer a little bit too, those investments.
Thank you. If I may just ask one small question more. So of the 300,000, how much of that is fees that you're collecting?
None. That is just the operating budget portion. So thank you for bringing that up. We have also worked, Luis, I think we had a slide in there somewhere. Part of the approach was we did have a goal of reviewing and adjusting athletic field fees. So our user groups do pay to schedule and use the fields. Everyone is putting in to help take care of these resources. This year was the first year that we had those fees in place and that we collected those. The actual fees that came in were right around 100,000 this year. And we are sort of scaffolding in that increase, if you will, over a 3-year period. So the fees are going up slightly this year, and our anticipated revenue for the field fees this year is projected to be about 150 to 180,000. So that's in addition to the operating budget funds.
Okay, so that will mean that you'll be able to handle more of these comprehensive field maintenance than you can right now. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, and they've already served in that way this year with having that very dry weather and having several of our irrigation systems go down. To have those funds available to be able to reinvest and react quickly was very critical, and being able to make sure that we didn't lose some of our grass turf at, I think it was 5 sites. So, they've really shown that just having those resources there throughout a year to adapt to some of those changes. Something else that could change on a field could be, bad weather and it gets used in a poor condition and then there's some damage done. Those things happen, and we want to be able to come in and make those repairs and investments, and be able to react to that throughout the year.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Albright. I want to note that we have been joined by Councilors Norton, Ryan, and Kelly. And I do see Councilor Norton's hand up. Councilor Norton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and super helpful presentation, very comprehensive. So really grateful for that. I have a couple questions. One, are we actively trying to identify and acquire additional, or wouldn't even always have to acquire additional space for fields? I'm very aware of the competition as there's more year-round sports, as there's competition from senior leagues. Several years ago, I know there was conversation, maybe only from me, but at least I was wondering why, why we weren't pursuing the field behind the old Parks and Rec building, I think behind Curve Street. I can't remember the name of the street. So anyway, just if you could comment on, are we actively trying to find more field space?
I can answer that one. Yes, Councilor Norton, part of our analysis in terms of, all the lands we have, and then, prioritizing some of these fields like Burr School fields, which due to its current topography, we're not able to maximize the use. So just by moving it out, we expand. So our initial approach is to sort of work with what we have and find a way to expand play. And, at some point, we may dive into more acquisition type, but that's something that the city will need to, sort of be on board with and really follow through. At this point, we're kind of trying to be as cautious and conscious as possible on the current land, so that we can capitalize on that.
Okay. I mean, that's something I would support, would be figuring out a way to just add to our field space. And then my other question is, and this is not going to be a surprise to Luis because we've talked about it. I loved seeing that stormwater management was on the list of areas that we address. But I do know that we've gotten pretty far along with master planning for McGrath without doing anything, having any sort of conversation about flood mitigation there, as that is upstream of Cheesecake. Well, Cheesecake Brook runs under that field, as it's the sort of headwaters or closer to the headwaters of the Cheesecake Brook sub watershed. It would be a great opportunity to address flooding at Albemarle if we were to ensure that the precipitation at McGrath were held in, rather than allowing it to move along under the culverts and along the stream. So I do know that the consultant for the McGrath master plan wasn't talking about that at all. So I'm just wondering if we're doing more, or if we plan to start doing more, to be looking for opportunities to address better stormwater management and flood mitigation, as we know that we are already seeing more intense rainstorms from climate change, and that is only going to significantly expand in the coming years.
Oh, Councilor Norton, thank you for bringing up McGrath. After our site meeting where we went to the abutters home, and they sort of told the story of flooding at the rear of McGrath, our consultant is finding ways to help capture some stormwater. Again, based on the constraints on the land that we have to get creative, such as, infiltration trenches along maybe a stone reservoir underneath, and then perhaps some swales sort of at the outskirts of the pathway. As every inch of rain counts, we certainly can't do a massive system there, but we're incrementally adding into these projects. And the same line of thinking for Burr School, and then Albemarle will have rain gardens and things like that. So we certainly are thinking a lot about that.
Okay.
Councilor Norton, can I just add on there, because we have been in some discussions with the DPW department.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, we were down
with DPW.
We are. We were down a couple of staff people during some of this planning process for these particular the first few fields that we've been bringing forward. But we are, sharing lists of all the park spaces, coordinating when projects happen, and making sure that we're having those discussions. Those meetings have started. So one of the positions that was vacant was the utilities director, and then Maria Rose also left from that department, who was closely connected with our work and what we do. So I do want to acknowledge that, and just say that those connections have been made, and we'll be working closely with them.
Okay, no, that's great to hear. And just for our residents who are here to be aware, there's a pretty strong mandate on the city to reduce phosphorus pollution to the Charles River, and a lot of the steps that we would take to reduce flooding risk are also things that we should be doing, or that would have the benefit of also reducing that phosphorus pollution. And so if we're already looking for that with one consultant, we might as well be having the other consultant who's doing the fields be coordinating. So it sounds like that is starting to happen more, which is great. So thank you all.
Thank you, Councilor Norton.
Councilor Norton.
Mr. Yo?
Chair Krinsman, if I could just quickly say that I think you know that we have not been afraid to purchase land. So either Webster Woods or areas near school projects. So we're going to keep our eyes open for properties, either for open space preservation and or for athletic field expansion. So we do have our eyes open, or for school facilities. So we are going to keep our eyes open. So Josh Morse and I and other commissioners do talk about that. And also, just as you know, we have a lot going on with stormwater right now. And so every single project in this city is going to be looking at stormwater improvements. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mr. Yo. The ghosts in the City Council chamber are asking us to wrap up this item, so I feel like we probably should do that. I mean, I guess those of you who aren't in the chamber aren't as worried, but I'm a little worried. So I don't see any other hands up, so if someone on the committee would like to make a motion to hold, I think that would be appropriate. President Albright has moved hold. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of hold on the committee, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. That is unanimous. Okay. Councilor Baker, you okay holding that item? Great. It is unanimous. The second and final item on our agenda is item 4723. This is the Citizens Group petition for moratorium on new or replacement artificial turf in Newton. I will read a little bit of the petition, what it says, just to level set folks, and then I'll explain how the public hearing is going to work. The petition asks for the City of Newton to postpone any immediate action for new or replacement artificial turf anywhere in Newton pending the completion, the public presentation and public hearing of each of the following: comprehensive study of the demand for playing fields by schools, sports, youth sports, camps, and the general public, and the adequacy of the field scheduling system; incorporation into the definition of playability, health, and medical guidelines for physical activity on artificial turf to avoid heat stroke, heat cramps, heat exhaustion, chemical exposure, and other harm, including specifically the greater health impacts on young children. Number 3, the development of a sustainable and organic management and maintenance plan for existing and future natural grass playing fields using such proven methods as those of Osborne Organics. And number 4, a comparative analysis by independent researchers of the total costs of natural grass fields versus artificial turf, including 7 different factors that are listed. This is a public hearing on that item. I was provided 15 names ahead of time who I have on my list. I have another 5 individuals who have signed up here in person. Anyone online looking to speak should just raise your electronic hand, and I will do my best to move around and incorporate anyone who wants to speak. Tonight, folks will have 3 minutes to speak. Jacqueline here will indicate when you have about 30 seconds left. And if you hit the 3-minute limit, I will ask you to wrap up, and I'll try to be reasonable about that. When I call on you, please state your name and your address, and then you can proceed with your 3 minutes. The plan for tonight would be after we have heard from everyone who is interested in speaking, we will close the public hearing, and then city councilors on the Programs and Services Committee can discuss that. Folks should know that under the city charter, we are required to hold a public hearing on the item submitted in this manner, and the city council is required to act on that item within 90 days. So we are well on schedule to do that, just giving you the lay of the land. For folks in the room, there's another sign-up sheet on the podium up there if you did not get a chance to sign up earlier, and I will come and collect that after I've gone through the rest of these names here. The first person on my list is Melissa Brown. Is Melissa Brown here or electronically here?
I am online.
Okay, please go ahead. And again, please start with your name and address if you would.
Melissa Brown, 949 Chestnut Street, parent of Newton South athletes, PhD social scientist, climate activist. Thank you for being here tonight. This is a complicated issue, and we appreciate the time and effort you are putting into learning more about it. Artificial turf is deadly to athletes, to the community, and to the environment. Yet a month ago, Parks Commissioner Banks stated they explored no alternative to artificial turf. The purpose of our citizens petition is to require 4 studies that can be used as a basis for that Plan B before further council decisions are made about using artificial turf in Newton. Based on input from experts, we believe that these studies will show 4 things. First, sufficient playing fields already exist in Newton to allow all sports to play during a transition to organic grass fields if the fields are managed appropriately. We think the genuine difficulties that teams have had scheduling fields is due to poor management of the fields overall by the Parks Department, probably due to years of insufficient funding. Second, there are significant risks of heat-related illness and death for athletes playing on artificial turf fields, which can reach over 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Safe usage of artificial turf fields, therefore, have more limited playing time than organic grass as the climate heats up. Third, costs of artificial turf are higher than organic grass when you include not just the $3 million installment fees, but also the costs of hazardous waste disposal, chemicals for routine maintenance and operations, monitoring of environmental contamination, and liability for toxic cleanup. Liability costs for artificial turf could bankrupt the city of Newton. Artificial turf sheds PFAS, heavy metals, and microplastics. Approaching federal and state regulations and legislation mean that liability for cleanup of PFAS can cost tens of millions of dollars over multiple years. We have scientific, medical, and policy experts who are waiting to speak, donating their time about community impacts and the huge financial liability of artificial turf. Councilors, please use this opportunity. I hope the council will pass the citizens measure requiring
30 seconds remaining
studies because of the public health and climate reasons. But at the very least, this measure is necessary as due diligence on whether installing artificial turf could bankrupt.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. The next name I have on my list, who I believe I see online, is Britta Lundberg. Ms. Lundberg, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, but please tell us your name and address and go ahead with your 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me tonight. I am Dr. Britta Lundberg. I live at 5 Oakwood Terrace. I'm a medical doctor trained in infectious diseases and internal medicine. I'm offering testimony as a Newton resident and as chair of the board of Greater Boston Physicians for Social Responsibility, a group of nationally recognized experts in public health, cancer epidemiology, environmental health, and we've worked with stakeholders including CDC, EPA, and the BU School of Public Health to author seminal research reports on the intersection between environmental degradation and children's health. I offer testimony here in favor of this moratorium regarding the unhealthful proposal to install artificial turf fields in Newton. Artificial turf is a toxic material associated with multiple health hazards. These include extreme heat, chemical exposure, friction abrasions, and important equity concerns. On hot summer days, as has been stated, artificial turf fields can reach extremely high temperatures. Such high temperatures pose a serious health hazard, especially to children running and playing at high intensity. The risks to these children include dehydration, heat stress, and heat stroke. Given the recent spike in student athlete deaths due to heat stroke, this is a serious concern. Toxic chemicals. Because they're made of ground up rubber truck tires, synthetic turf fields contain the many toxic chemicals that go into the manufacture, including styrene, lead, PFAS, benzene, some of the most potent carcinogens and/or neurotoxins that exist. Lead is toxic to children's brains and nervous systems and leads to IQ loss in children. Benzene, a known carcinogen that causes leukemia, including childhood leukemia, and importantly has health effects at every level. there is no safe level of benzene or lead. PFAS, or forever chemicals, are used in the artificial turf manufacturing process and are linked to an array of such concerning health consequences like cancer and reproductive harms that the Massachusetts Medical Society last year approved policy that advocates for the banning of PFAS chemicals due to their toxicity. Children playing on artificial turf fields are exposed to all of these chemicals, and their exposure is especially intense on hot, sunny days when high temperatures cause these toxic chemicals to vaporize upward into the air the children are breathing. There are equity concerns. Most of the manufacture and incineration and disposal of artificial turf occurs in low-income communities and communities of color. So using artificial turf doesn't just hurt the health of your children, but other, even more vulnerable
30 seconds
children
remaining.
also. As physicians, we make life and death decisions, but I would like to suggest that you, council members and committee members, do also. I wonder if the Hippocratic Oath, above all do no harm, should be as mandatory to your work as it is for mine, because the decisions you make here have important health ramifications. Why should a talented student athlete have to pay with their health to play the game they love? If you hear of a Newton South athlete experiencing sudden death due to heat stroke on your artificial turf field,
Your time has elapsed.
If you approve this toxic exposure to them, could you say with any confidence that your decision didn't play a role? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lundberg.
Dr. Lundberg, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lundberg.
Thank you.
Lisa Goodwin Robbins. I apologize. Please hold on one second. Yes, Councilor Baker?
I don't know if it's technically possible to make the caption bigger because it makes it easier to try and follow the speech. I don't know if that's feasible technically, but.
Jacqueline will look into that.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Robin, please go ahead. I don't think the microphone is on.
Is it on now?
That's better. Yep.
My name is Lisa Goodwin Robbins. I live at 93 Hancock Avenue. I'm going to begin with a quote. Can anyone believe it is possible to lay down such a barrage of poisons on the surface of the earth without making it unfit for all life? Rachel Carson wrote that in her seminal book, Silent Spring in 1962. She could have been talking about artificial turf. Why would we tear up natural earth in order to cover it with poisons and then send our children out to play in the hot sun? My name is Lisa Goodwin Robbins. I live and work and vote in Newton. I've raised children in Newton schools. They played on playgrounds and athletic fields. I'm a registered architect with a specialty in healthier building materials and sustainable design. I'm also the board chair at Silent Spring Institute, the leading scientific research organization dedicated to uncovering environmental causes of breast cancer using evidence-based research, which just so happens to be in Newton.
Can you just slow a little bit? I'm trying to follow you, but you're going a little fast for the mic.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep to my 3 minutes.
No, that's my fault. Don't charge the time against her.
I'm going to focus on 2 public health hazards about artificial turf. It's such a great example of, because there's actually so many things wrong with it, it can be hard to know where to begin. So recycled crumb rubber is used as fill and padding for the turf. It's made from discarded automobile tires. You know what's in that, as Dr. Lundberg said, heavy metals, volatile organic compounds, semi-volatile organic compounds, and other toxic chemicals that don't fit into those 3 categories. No one tests the ground up tires for toxics because really, what's the point? Every handful of automobile crumbs, those little black pellets that follow your children home, has a different toxic profile, and it's all bad. Recycled crumb rubber toxics are known contributors to cancer and neurodevelopmental disorders. On a grass field, you know what we call fill and padding? Topsoil. PFAS is used for the fake green plastic. PFAS stands for per and polyfluoral alkyl substances, an entire class of chemicals, currently over 12,000 different types. Each one has at least 1 carbon-fluorine bond. They're known as forever chemicals because they break down on a glacial timeline. PFAS chemicals are known contributors to cancer, elevated cholesterol, ulcerative colitis, thyroid disease, lower birth weight babies, preeclampsia, and decreased vaccine response. On a natural grass field, you know what we call that green stuff? Grass. So who's protecting our children? We're protecting our children today, right now. The EPA, the CDC, the World Health Organization, no one is protecting us from these toxic chemicals unless we stand up for ourselves and our children. The European Union just announced a comprehensive ban on PFAS starting in 2024, with a full phase out by 2030 on all uses except for essential medical devices. At least 15 states have PFAS legislation and proposals now, including Massachusetts. So why install toxic turf fields today?
30 seconds remaining.
When it will be hazardous waste in just a few years. With the limited opportunities to dispose of hazardous waste, it could reasonably cost more to dispose of this artificial turf tomorrow than it will to install it today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kyla Bennett.
Yes, thank you. My name is Kyla Bennett. I live at 2 Chickadee Lane in Easton, Massachusetts. I am the Science Director for Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. I have a PhD in ecology and a law degree. I was the one who discovered PFAS in artificial turf in 2019. I'm speaking tonight to respectfully urge you to pass the measure that places a pause on any new or replacement artificial turf until certain studies are completed. First, I want to let you know that scientists have tested dozens of samples of artificial turf, and they all have PFAS in the blades, the backing, and sometimes the infill. Manufacturers are now admitting that they use PFAS intentionally in artificial turf. Second, despite what you may hear from the industry, there is no such thing as a safe PFAS. Third, PFAS is leaching off the fields into surrounding soils and water. Tetra Tech, a consultant for the Martha's Vineyard Commission, found that 12 parts per trillion of the PFAS-6, the 6 PFAS regulated by the Mass DEP, will leach off a brand new artificial turf field. More will leach off as the field is exposed to rain, UV light, and use. Massachusetts has a limit of 20 parts per trillion for PFAS-6 in drinking water and groundwater. Currently, EPA does not regulate PFAS in drinking water, soil, or groundwater. But in June of 2022, EPA decided that there is virtually no safe level of PFOA and PFOS, 2 types of PFAS, in drinking water. EPA will release their own regulatory limit any day, and it will be much lower than Massachusetts DEP's limits. Mass DEP regulates the unpermitted release and cleanup of hazardous materials, including PFAS-6. If Mass DEP determines that PFAS were released on a town property, the municipality will be responsible for addressing contamination on that and any downstream properties affected. Indeed, Mass DEP recently sent a notice to the town of West Tisbury telling the town that they were the responsible party in the contamination of wells downstream from their fire station. This is a huge liability issue. Moreover, each artificial turf field sheds about 480 pounds of microplastics per year just from the grass blades. There is much more if you take into account the infill. Artificial turf also exacerbates climate change. Manufacturing, installation, service, and disposal of a 2-acre artificial turf field is responsible for the generation of a total of 55.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide. Natural grass, on the other hand, has a net reduction of 16.9 metric tons of carbon dioxide. Finally, there is nowhere to recycle these fields at the end of life. There is one proposed recycling facility in Pennsylvania, but they are currently being taken to court for illegally storing 6,200 rolls of discarded synthetic turf.
30 seconds remaining.
Recycling artificial turf is an urban myth. Newton has the chance to be a leader, not just for your community, but for the country. I urge you to think about the financial liability and the huge environmental consequences of artificial turf when making this decision. Pass the proposed measure until you have all the facts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bennett. You know, we have a former colleague of ours has a PhD, he's an MD and the JD, one of the smartest people I know. So maybe you see each other at the monthly meetings of like the 5 of you who have done that. So next I have Laura Spark.
Well, Kyla Bennett is also one of the smartest people I know, so that is that makes sense. My name is Laura Spark. I live at 20 Bardwell Street in Jamaica Plain. I'm a senior policy advocate at Clean Water Action, where I work on issues related to climate and toxics. I am also an urban planner with the Master of Architecture and Master of City Planning from MIT. Much of what I was going to say has already been said. I completely agree with everything that was said by the people who spoke before me. I just want to add, just to try to touch on something that has not been touched on already. Massachusetts is currently considering a number of PFAS bills. The bill that is most likely to pass the Massachusetts legislature is based on recommendations that came from a 8-month-long PFAS interagency task force study, which also resulted in a series of recommendations. The co-chairs of that PFAS interagency task force have introduced a bill to ban PFAS in most products, and that includes an artificial turf. So I think it's important to understand that if Newton greenlights artificial turf fields in the year ahead, the city will be approving in the installation of a product that is going to be banned no later than the year 2030. And as Kyla has said, no artificial turf that has been tested has been found to be PFAS free. I understand that a consultant came and spoke at a previous program and services call and said that that possibly his manufacturer, the one that he was recommending, was PFAS free. Again, no tested PFAS has been found to be PFAS free, and I'm not aware of any manufacturer that actually provides a warranty that they're PFAS free. I just want to also emphasize that that same consultant said that there was no peer-reviewed science on the hazards of artificial turf, and that is also just flat out not true. Studies have shown higher rates of certain injuries, including abrasions and lower body injuries. Professional athletes, including football players represented by the National Football League Players Association and U.S. women's soccer team, have demanded natural grass instead of artificial turf.
30 seconds remaining.
Even going to court to demand it. And I would just add that while these professional players have the clout to demand safe playing conditions, children in Newton depend on political decision makers, to put their health and safety first. And I would say that the current plans in Newton absolutely do not do that.
Thank you very much. Next person I have on my list is Ellie Goldberg. Ellie
Good
Goldberg
evening.
here. Go ahead. Yep.
Hey, my name is Ellie Goldberg. I live at 79 Elmore Street, and I'm a longtime advocate for healthy kids, safe schools, and sustainable communities. You might have seen my recent Green News article that Newton kids deserve better, say no to toxic turf. And my point is that the artificial turf is not a responsible choice for Newton, especially when so much of the plan depends on misinformation and false claims. Just as with tobacco and pesticides, so with artificial turf. And we know that manufacturers or suppliers' testing, analysis, or reassurances are not a reliable basis for judging the safety of the product. The Parks Department's presentation claims to present a balanced approach to artificial turf, but there's nothing balanced about compromising health, safety, and environmental quality. The proposed $3,240,000 plan is not a balance, it's a bad trade-off. I helped organize the citizens petition because the proposal for the new artificial turf fields did not consider public health information and concerns about future costs. Short-sighted decisions in the past, such as siting schools or sports fields on wetlands and inadequate maintenance, not only have exposed people to poor conditions and accelerated deterioration, but end up costing taxpayers much more. It's not a prudent choice. The citizens petition calls for the City Council to conduct an independent comparative cost and risk analysis of the true cost of organically managed high-performance natural grass fields compared to artificial turf. That is the only way to determine what is best for our community, our city budget, and long-term economic security. So I urge you to listen to the experts and the scientists and the physicians whose ethic of care and responsibility urge us to heed the warnings about injuries and heat-related illness, undisclosed costs, and potential liabilities. For PFAS contamination, the town is taking all the risk, especially when the expected more stringent state standards to control sources of PFAS require municipalities to take action to protect groundwater and drinking water. I urge you to question the claim that the filter for the field runoff is adequate when we are talking about microplastics and contaminants such as PFAS measured in parts per trillion and parts per quadrillion. And I urge you to question the claim that the current
30 seconds remaining.
Turf fields will be recycled and the new artificial turf is recyclable. That is wish cycling. Any reuse of any artificial turf component is a high energy and chemical intensive and polluting process. Like I worried back in 2008, the city would be left responsible for the cost of the disposal of the hazardous waste. And I urge you to question the claim that PFAS is only a concern at high exposures. That is false. No exposure to PFAS.
Your time has elapsed.
Or body burden is safe. I don't want to debate how much exposure to toxic chemicals is acceptable. No exposure is acceptable if it's avoidable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goldberg. Pat Irwin. The next name on the list is Pat Irwin.
I yield my time.
Fair enough. Thank you. The next name I have is Martina Jackson. Is there a Martina Jackson online? Ms. Jackson? I feel like I've heard that name before. Martina?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chairman Krinsman and distinguished members. I would like to speak to you about concerns that I have based not only on what you've heard today, but I am a biochemist and I'm relying on that training as well. I'd like to recall some of the products that the manufacturers knew were a hazard before we all knew they were hazards. For example, as has been mentioned, tobacco. The producers of cigarettes knew that that was a problem long before the Marlboro Man died and before we now read the warnings on packages of cigarettes. Similarly, coal and fossil fuel were considered the best source of energy until we realized that coal was killing people, fossil fuel is killing us and the earth. The issue of, for example, lead pipes. Lead pipes were part of every construction until we realized that the water going through them contained lead that was killing and destroying our children. Nuclear power, when I was growing up, was considered to be the best new source of energy until we noticed that cancer rates spiked around power plants, and not to mention what happened at Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island. I would like to also mention at the same time that, as has been said, there are 2 bills, one in the House and one in the Senate in Massachusetts, that would ban the use of art and the employment of artificial turf in any municipal setting or state setting. I am asking you to follow the example of communities like Boston, Concord, Martha's Vineyard, Wayland, Marblehead, and Belmont, all communities that have taken action and are considering banning or have banned artificial turf. There is no way to recycle or get rid of PFAS. I'm asking you before you vote to consider the science and the evidence that will convince you, I think, I hope. Thank you again very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Thank you for that distressing trip down memory lane. Ted Hess-Mahan. Ted Hess-Mahan. Distinguished former counselor Ted Hess-Mahan. Please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know about distinguished. My name is Ted Hess-Mahan. I live at 871 Watertown Street in West Newton. As the chairman noted, I was an at-large member of the Board of Aldermen and the City Council for 14 years. I'm here to support the petition. It sort of felt like deja vu because it was 14 years ago in 2009 that 7 of my colleagues and I co-docketed an item which was intended to get the city to do what we thought was a reasonable step for all the reasons that you've heard today, and the additional one that involves the forever chemicals, PFAS. We had docketed an item which was to propose an ordinance requiring that the installation of synthetic infield turf athletic fields on city-owned property shall use sustainable, recyclable, lead-free, non-toxic products to the maximum extent feasible. That didn't pass. I'm sorry that it didn't. I would note that President Albright was one of my co-sponsors. I think it's important for the health of children as well as adults who use these fields to do what Boston and many other communities have done for all the reasons that all of the previous speakers brought up. And I'm very grateful to them because they're a lot smarter and they know a lot more than I do. I just thought that this was a very important thing to do back then. My reasons haven't changed, so I urge you to support the petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hess-Mahan. You know, I also can't believe that 2009 was 14 years ago. Is that true? I feel like that adds up. Reminds me of the fact that my wife tells me that every night at midnight she's shocked that it's 8 p.m. I digress. Susan Mirsky. Susan Mirsky?
Yes. Hi.
Please go ahead.
I'd like to thank everybody who has spoken on behalf of this petition with a lot of very important information. Tonight, I just come in and I speak to you as a parent. I live at 68 Hyde Street, Newton Highlands, and my son went to Newton South where he played lacrosse on the fields, and he was loved lacrosse and did it in college also on grass fields. But then,
I hate to interrupt you, but if his name was Dan, he was a heck of a lacrosse player.
Oh, yes, Daniel Mirsky, right. But then he played on a turf field and tore his meniscus, and that has never healed. He has still has problems given that, and that's his loss, and in a sense, as a parent, my loss because of his loss, and I would not want that to happen to another child or to another parent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And please tell Dan I said hello.
I shall.
Julia Wolf. Is Julia
Hi
Wolf
there.
here? Yes.
I'm here.
Please go ahead.
So I'm Julia Wolf. I live at 170 Cherry Street in West Newton, and I work as an environmental planner. I wanted to encourage the city of Newton to keep their natural grass fields and not convert any existing grass into artificial turf. I'd like to point you to work done by UMass Lowell's Toxic Use Reduction Institute, or TURI. It was an institute established by the Commonwealth in 1989, and they're an independent government agency with a mandate to protect workers, communities, and the environment from toxic chemicals and pollution. They have a whole webpage dedicated to the health and safety of playing surfaces, and I'd really urge any of the decision makers here to review their website. I point you to a fact sheet on the website titled Athletic Playing Fields and Artificial Turf, Considerations for Municipalities and Institutions. And Turi concludes that it's important to take into consideration the full cost of ownership when making a decision on type of fields. This includes cost of installation and maintenance, the likelihood of player injuries, temperatures of the playing environment, future disposal of the turf, and growing concern, of course, which we've heard tonight, is the athlete's exposure to toxic chemicals that are found in artificial turf. As others have gone over already, it includes polyaromatic hydrocarbons, VOCs, metals such as zinc and lead, and PFAS. These forever chemicals, they're highly persistent in the environment and they can last hundreds of years. PFAS is actually added to the machinery, extruders, in making the artificial grass, and it contaminates the product. On this fact sheet, there's a table that shows a comparison of life cycle costs of different athletic fields, and natural soil-based fields are the least expensive in a 16-year annualized cost study. Turi recommends organically managed natural grass options, which reduce the overall carbon footprint by being able to capture carbon dioxide, a serious greenhouse gas. Also, natural grass offers habitat to plants, insects, soil microorganisms, and other wildlife. Artificial turf, on the other hand, eliminates these areas of habitat and contributes to the
30
microplastics,
seconds remaining.
where those small particles of plastic, grass blades, and infill migrate into the surrounding environment. So let's choose the safer options for all of us and ditch the plans for expanding artificial turf. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next name I have is, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Barbara Brussel-Glazer. Another distinguished former counselor and one of my favorite people on the planet. I don't mind saying that publicly.
Thank you very much, Counselor Krinsman. Hello, other counselors, former colleagues. Nice to see you. I'm Barbara Brussel-Glazer, 20 Auburndale Avenue. So you have heard tonight from experts who know far more than I do about the science that we're talking about here. So I'll take my time to talk to you about our future as a community. For the council and the administration to continue to flout the just concerns about this turf is doing a disservice to your constituents. What we need now is a serious reassessment of synthetic turf use based on public health data and environmental science. We can't continue to put off looking at the reality of our situation and what these fields do to the children who play on them and to the soil, water, and air that the chemicals leach into. A turf that is a little less toxic than what we used to use is simply not good enough for our children here in Newton or any other children. 4 years ago, the citizens of Belmont, Mass. Rejected plans for a new artificial turf field. Athletes and environmentalists stood together to demand better for their community. As you've heard, Sharon, Wayland, Springfield, and Marblehead have banned artificial turf, and the city of Boston, Concord, and Martha's Vineyard have a moratorium until they learn more information. We are here telling you tonight that in Newton, too, we want better, just like these other communities. The no on override signs say, Newton overspends. I don't know if that's true, but we must be careful about what we spend and what we spend it on. So yes, let's increase the money we use to maintain our grass fields. Let's irrigate more, etc. But let's not spend millions of dollars of public money on cancerous ground coverings. We know more than we did in 2008. Newton must wake up. There must be no plans whatsoever to add any new synthetic turf to the soils of Newton. This is painfully obvious on a site like Albemarle Field, which abuts the brook and the Charles River, but it is also true for all sites in Newton. It saddens me to think that I rest easier knowing my daughter, a Newton North student, does not play a sport on the artificial turf there. I hope Newton Parks Rec and Culture and the Parks and Rec Commission
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Can begin a new chapter in how they conceive of management of our precious fields. I beg them to cease and desist from any future planning of new artificial turf. Those of us who swim at Gaff, watch baseball at Albemarle, or the fireworks have no appetite for toxic turf as an option there. We know too much, and it is time to do better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and it's good to see you. Yasmin Dalton. Yasmin Dalton. Going once? Okay. Lorenz Glazer. Lorenz Glazer. Okay. Claudette Beit Aharon.
Hi, my name is Claudette Beit Aharon. I live at 566 Center Street in Newton. And I was shocked. Only recently did I learn that we had all this artificial turf already all over Newton. And I would like to add to what everybody else has said that the NFL is not your progressive environmental organization, and the players there aren't interested in the friction burns and the sprains, et cetera, that happen on artificial turf. To me, putting in artificial turf is like having all your teeth pulled and getting dentures because you don't want to floss, brush, or go for cleanings, because it's oh so efficient to be without them. So not only is it the most expensive option when you look at all of the impacts that everybody has already discussed, but it's very hypocritical and doesn't jibe with the whole atmosphere in our town, where we've put up these beautiful solar panels over the library parking lots. We've encouraged electric vehicles, and all of that gets destroyed. And in the balance, when you put artificial turf on the fields. The previous woman earlier in the program was saying that you can play on these fields all the time. You don't have to wait for them to dry out, etc. But when it's 125, 140, 160 degrees on this heat-generating, carbon-producing monstrosity of a plastic rug on our fields, you can't play on that. And if you do, the results will be dire. So I'm hoping that other people in the community will also wake up to this. Martina didn't even call me to sign the petition. I only found out about this the other day. But I would really, really beg you in every possible way that I can to not authorize this horrible turf. Thank you.
Thank you. Martina, you were called out by name. Do you want to rebut that? Okay. John Rice, yet another distinguished former counselor.
Thank you, Chairman Krinsman and members of the City Council. John Rice, 9 Selden Street in Newton. I'd like to just give some background. I was on this esteemed body in Programs and Services for 10 years, and also City Council for 10 years.
You ran much better than I do. You ran this body.
I was chairman of Programs and Services. But I'm also currently on the Parks and Recreation Commission, and I am, I guess, the first person to be speaking against the moratorium. I was part of the group. First, I'd like to acknowledge this committee, the City Council, and Mayor Fuller about the significant improvement of the funding for the 4 fields in the city of Newton. It was a significant budget increase, which has made a positive impact for Commissioner Banks and the maintenance department. The maintenance department of Parks and Rec does a lot of work to keep the fields. The biggest issue we have in the city is demand from youth sports, high school sports. We have the delay of the high school athletes getting out of school, which pushed even more people, more student athletes onto the fields later in the day. I was part of the group that that privately fundraised to put the lights at the stadium field at Newton South High School. When we put the lights at the stadium field, it provided significantly much more with the use of that field because you had it past the 4 or 5 o'clock time frame. And with it, I was also part of the committee along with Buzz Dunker here, who worked for 13 years to fundraise with the City Council and the Community Preservation to renovate the Newton Highlands fields. We put the city of Newton put significant investment into Newton Highlands Playground, millions of dollars. However, the city at that point did not have the funds to put a synthetic turf field there. They put a grass field there. After all those years of work of having a multi-use field on Newton Highlands Playground, there was a lit field that people were using the field until 8 and 9 o'clock every night. And I would drive by that field every single day and say, what a great field it is. Parks and Rec is doing a great job maintaining that field. Within a year, that field was offline because of the demand and use of that field. Parks and Rec Department and within the city had to take that field offline.
30 seconds remaining.
Offline for a whole year. And before it brought back on the last year or so, recently. So if you have grass fields, there's not enough grass fields, there's not enough time, there's not enough light to do other things. You need the synthetic turf fields. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Melissa Dietrich? Did I get that wrong? I apologize.
Hi, Melissa Dietrich. I live at 30 Sheldon Road, Newton Center, right off of Route 9. Also a member, a co-president of the Newton South Boosters. I've got a son who plays soccer, who's a junior. Appreciate everyone's points that they've stated tonight. It does make one sort of, think through sort of both sides. But tonight, I actually am wanting to replace the Newton South turf field. I believe the Parks and Recs in a prior presentation said that the turf field lasts for like 9 to 10 years, and that's what we're coming up on. Actually, a worn turf field is actually more detrimental than replacing and having a new one. It does lead to more injury. My son being a senior next year, I don't want him playing on that 9-year-old turf field. Yes, I hear about quality of turf and the chemicals that it conveys. There's a lot of stuff in our town. If you look around all the building, I live on Route 9. The area on Dudley is going to be developed. There's going to be a lot more traffic. There's a lot of things are environmentally around. My son loves soccer. We've got 500 student athletes that sign up each season at Newton South that play. Grass fields, you cannot play if there is rain. As Parks and Recs has said, there is a longer time span for kids to play, and given that our schools get out later, it's necessary for that and lighting, which we're very thankful to have lighting on those fields. That's it.
Thank you very much. The last name I have is Reese Genzer. And if there is anyone online, please raise your hand. If there's anyone in the room, please, you can actually, you don't need to sign up. If there's anyone in the room, you can just raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you as well. Otherwise, this is the last speaker. So, Mr. Genzer.
Last but not least, right? My name is Reese Genzer, longtime resident of Newton. I live on 195 Old Farm Road. I have 3 children, but 2 that have been strong student athletes over at Newton South. And I've grown up, quite a bit lately, and to see, I appreciate all the research, all the stuff that's going on, but we live in a world today where we can almost pick anything and start picking why it's wrong. From Diet Coke, Diet Pepsi, to the foods we eat, to the paint we put up on our walls. I just had a leak in my house, And I had ProServe come over, and they told me now asbestos is now in the paint that we use. It came from the same mines, it just wasn't dug as deep, so everyone's testing for that. So again, the world we live in, there's problems with everything that we'd have. And to me, the grass fields, and to have my kids to be out to play on grass fields, they just can't do it around this area. We live in the Northeast. I've heard all this stuff, it's great to have grass, we just can't play on grass. But no one has presented a solution besides the field turf. Everyone's just explained to me what is wrong with the field turf. But if we have grass in Newnan, the kids growing up in Newnan aren't going to be able to run around and play on these fields because they're unplayable. If you've seen what's gone on in the Northeast here and you've seen what's gone on in Newnan, it just doesn't work. So to me, to have my kids run out and play on these fields, which I think are extremely adequate, unfortunately, South Field needs to be replaced because we talk about injury. The fields they've lived their life. There are better fields. We have field turf. If we have the ability to replace the field turf with a better field turf, fantastic. Let's do it. I'm so proud of what Parks and Recs is doing, the direction they're going in. And, you know, we can sit in this room and we can knock down everything that anybody is doing to try and make things better. But if you're going to do that, you got to come up with solutions to try and make things better versus just knocking it down. And unfortunately, grass fields just don't work here. So what is the solution? And I'll leave it with that. What is the solution? We have good alternatives, and we need to replace those fields. If your kids are student athletes that play at these high schools and are growing up in youth sports, we need these turf fields. And they are significantly better than they were 10 years ago. Significantly. And most studies will tell you that. So we can see things wrong with everything that we do. We drive electrical cars now, right? My son's 20 years old. You know what he said? Dad, when the batteries are done, what are we going to do with them? What are we going to do with the electrical batteries that we have? No one's come up with those answers, right? So everything we do, you know, vape pens, you name it. Whatever we do in life, there's issues, there's problems. And, you know, we'll sit here and we'll pick apart something that is actually really good. So I'm all in favor, but I appreciate everything that everyone's come up with and all the research, but Newnan needs these field turfs, so that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Genzer. I have two people online. By the way, Maddie had quite a year, and good luck to her next year, continuing her career. I have Barry Elliott, then David Belfort, then a gentleman here in the room, and then we'll proceed. So, Mr. Elliott.
Hello, my name's Barry Elliott. I've been a volunteer with Newton Girls Soccer for 9 years. I'm concerned that the last time we went to the school committee and we asked them to delay the changing of the school start time because it's going to affect our ability to use fields when the high schools get out of school later. And they said, that's not our problem, someone else will deal with it. Well, the problem is the high schools expanded the fields that they used. They took fields away from us. They expanded on the fields that we shared, they stayed longer so that we were unable to use those grass fields that they used anymore. And it resulted in our kids, us having to shorten our practice times and our kids getting less time on the field. I understand that these chemicals are potentially dangerous. I'm reminded of the people that said you shouldn't vaccinate your kids because they're dangerous. Vaccines are dangerous. There were studies that showed that the vaccines were dangerous. Personally, I think childhood obesity, the fact of childhood obesity is way more important and something that should be eradicated more than the potential for danger from some of these materials. Our organization currently has very little access to the turf fields. We've had to, there are not enough grass fields for us to run our program. We have to spend $100,000 a year, our program along with the boys, renting the turf fields at Fessenden. If the high school fields go away, the high schools will expand the grass fields that they use. They will take more away from us, our elementary and middle school athletes, and we will be forced to go to other places like the Fessenden Middle School and try to get more turf fields put elsewhere for our use. So if the city doesn't build these turf fields, someone else is going to. Here in Newton, That's what's going to happen in Boston when the clubs lose access to public turf fields. They're going to have to go to private entities that are going to put more turf fields on their properties. That's it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Mr. Belfort?
Thank you so much. My name is David Belfort. I live at 115 Claremont Street in Newton, and I've been a coach, youth coach for soccer for 15 years, and I'm on the Newton Youth Soccer Board. Most of the points in favor of turf have already been made, but the biggest one for me is that we all agree that there's a lack of access to sufficient fields. I haven't heard a lot of ideas from the folks proposing this petition on what we're going to do with our children who get enormous benefit from youth sports. There are simply not enough fields for the boys and girls who aren't part of the private clubs that are now buying up all of the prime real estate, the best fields in town. And so one anecdote sort of comes to mind for me. One night I was driving down Albemarle Road. It was raining, and on the left, all of the grass fields were closed because they closed during the rain and for several days after the rain. And they were empty, and there was sort of this mist rising above those fields. And on the right was Fessenden, where Surf rents all their space, a private club, a fairly large private club. And they had multiple teams running practices, kids running around. It's a really stark contrast why this is really a socioeconomic issue as well. You've got the schools that need the space. You've got the 2,000 plus kids who play soccer, lacrosse, etc. These are children. Some have money and some don't have money. And if you're going to come up with an idea to eliminate all of this field access, you need somewhere, you need some solution to sort of this disparity where you have the rich kids in the clubs playing and the city kids and the school kids being squashed onto fewer and fewer fields. So I don't think anybody wants to poison our children. On the other hand, where are they going to play? Where are they going to, the obesity epidemic was mentioned. Mental health of athletics needs to be mentioned. These kids need to be running around and having fun, and we need solutions on where to put them rather than outlawing sort of the one outlet that we currently have. And that's really all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This gentleman here in the room.
Thanks, Chairman Krinsman. I'm Ralph Rinaldi. I live at 16 Wyoming Road. One of the advantages of going last is I'll probably be able to throw out about half of what I was going to say. I'm a former head of fields and field scheduling for Newton Girls Soccer, Newton Youth Soccer, and I would have loved to have seen this Parks and Rec plan 10 years ago. It's sort of remarkable to me that it's almost like when I was watching it, we're existing in this sort of time warp where we don't know what we know about the climate crisis, and we don't know what we know about PFAS chemicals. And I wish we could go back to that time, because 10 years ago, when I was trying to get every little kid, boys and girls, on a soccer field as many times as I could during the week, I would have loved to have those extra turf fields. But we can't go back in time. So what we have to do is look at this plan that Parks has come up with and see that the solution to this false choice of turf versus grass, it's not a choice at all. They have the solution to the problem is in the plan. They're bringing more grass fields online, right? So we should be able to bring those grass fields online and use them to replace the turf fields. And we need a plan that doesn't increase grass fields, because that's going against the trend of climate. That's going against the trend of what we know about PFAS chemicals. That's going against the trend of what other communities are doing. We need a plan that phases those out and replaces them with grass. But what am I hearing from parks? I'm hearing only the advantages of turf fields, and I'm only hearing about maintenance practices that we had 20 years ago. There's nothing about new maintenance practices, advances that have been made, organic fields, anything like that. We need to be proactive, and at least we need a plan for comparison purposes at a minimum that says, here's the plan with just grass fields and modern maintenance practices and cutting edge maintenance practices that leads, okay, and here's the plan with grass and turf. And let's compare the costs.
30 seconds remaining.
That is the basics of what I would expect from good governments in Newton, is a thorough examination of the problem, a couple of different solutions, and an informed choice, and not this sort of rushed process that we're in right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker I have is David Tesler.
Hi, David Tesler, 70 Honeywell Avenue in Newton, former Newton Little League board member, current president of the New England Association of USA Track and Field. Just try not to duplicate too many of the previous comments here, but speaking on the benefits of sports and athletics. So throughout COVID, we've seen the increased reports of mental health issues in the school-age communities. Sports provides the social and emotional well-being that through sports, it happens through the community and connectedness on the field. Hard to provide these benefits when practices are canceled, games are canceled, and otherwise access to these fields are curtailed. This is also an equity issue. Previous speakers hit on this. The youth sports industrial complex will gladly take the time and money from the people in the community who can travel and who can afford the private clubs. And if a kid can't get access locally, the parents and kids will go to where they can. Who's left behind in that? What will happen to those opportunities at the school level when you can't field a team, when they start to dwindle or the competitiveness falls off? It's just going to exaggerate that. The references to the NFL and soccer do point to the benefits, but comparing local sports to $1 billion enterprise may not be the right comparison for a community level set of programs. And then not a major issue, but I do hear the temperature concern, and it's a real one. There are wet bulb temperature regulations at the MIA level that prevent athletics from happening when temperatures hit a certain level. So some of these positions are already in place, but there's an equity issue here, and there's the counterbalance on the public health level of the mental well-being of the students that we're impacting.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tesler, it's possible that you are the penultimate speaker. And Bert, are you the ultimate speaker?
I like that pun. I'm Bert Konofsky. I live at 423 Albemarle Road in Newton.
We're having a little trouble hearing you. Are you able to either get closer? It's just faint.
Sorry, is this better?
That's a little better, yep.
Okay. Sorry, my name is Bert Konofsky. I live at 423 Albemarle Road in Newton, and I'm also the director of Newton Youth Ultimate. Newton Youth Ultimate is a newer program. We've been around for about 5 or 6 years in the city, and this past fall we had about 150 kids in our programs, kids in grades kindergarten through 12. I've played Ultimate for a long time. I love playing Ultimate on grass, but even more than the playing surface, I just love the sport. And as some of the other youth sports speakers have spoken up about tonight, we have a real field crunch and field crisis in the city. And I can't speak to the science. I mean, many people, with more advanced degrees than I have, were speaking out about the potential damage of turf fields and litigation. All I can say is that when I'm trying to schedule fields for my program to get, the kids who are finally finding a new sport that they can play, somewhere where they feel comfortable, it is very, very difficult for me to get any sort of space to run that program. And unfortunately or not, increasing the stock of turf fields in the city helps my program and helps other programs just recruit and retain more and more youth players. And I think at the end of the day, we're really talking about, everyone wants young kids playing sports, and obviously we want them to be playing in as safe a way as possible. I did write a letter to the city council, and I'll just quickly bring up 3 issues here. If we do end up banning turf fields, or we go through a lengthy process, three things will happen. Fewer players will be able to compete on Newton sports teams, just because it's going to be numbers crunch. As others have said, the cost of playing youth sports is going to go up because all of these programs are going to be forced to go to Fessenden, Park School, other places around that have turf fields, and they are more than willing to take our money. And honestly, some programs, like the smaller ones like mine, might vanish completely, just because it's going to be so difficult to get any sort of fields in. We're already slotted behind soccer and lacrosse and some of the other big programs. If there's no field space, then there's no program for me. I would, again, I understand the science. I'm not opposed to the science, but I do think unless we're willing to consider really different options, like maybe taking part of Webster Woods and making that a grass field complex, or even taking part of the new, I think it's Dudley Road complex or Dudley Road area that was just, that the city's trying to figure out what to do with, make that a sports complex. I think our only real option at this point is to look at turf and try to install it in the best way possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this item? I see one more. I didn't even say going once.
Hi, my name's Midge Connolly. I'm a lifelong resident of Newton, and I've either played or coached on just about every single field that's here. I'm also a member of the Rec Commission, so I just wanted to also make note that wasn't noted in the earlier presentation that the Parks and Recreation Commission is moving away from the filler that has been used historically, and they're moving towards a much more eco-friendly field filler. And I think that we'll get that presentation, that information to you, because I think that's most critical as we're talking about more eco-friendly fillers that would be safer for any of the athletes. Again, I would just second the social emotional well-being of our students in this critical time that playing sports allows them to have access to. So I thank you, and I just wanted to make that point. Good evening.
Thank you. Do you have some familiarity with social and emotional well-being of kids, like in elementary school? Yeah, okay. Anyone else? Anyone else? Oh, for a change, we have a distinguished former city councilor ready to speak.
How many people actually come up and say, I wasn't going to speak, but. So I'm Amy Sangiolo, a former city councilor, and I just want to point out a couple of things. As many of you know, I run Fix City News, so I get to watch a lot of meetings. So I watched the Parks and Rec presentation at the Conservation Commission meeting. And what was painful about watching that was that they were like, okay, there's a small sliver that we have jurisdiction on, like the health and safety of these kids, the concerns about the environmental impact. Maybe we shouldn't worry about that because the city council will do that. Then I go to a city council meeting, I think it was Programs and Services. I think Brenda Noel said, are we even discussing whether or not we should do new turf or not? Has that decision already been made? And the answer was, yeah, I guess so. So Conservation Commission was looking to City Council. City Council looks to Parks and Rec, Conservation Commission was looking to City Council. City Council is looking to maybe Parks and Rec Commission, Parks and Rec Commission to kind of look and study. So the community that I'm seeing has come out before you to say, the buck stops here. You guys have to start looking at this stuff. Whether you have a moratorium or not, you have to at least make an informed decision and start looking at all the information that has been presented to you on both sides. They both have very valid reasons and concerns. My kids and I was a soccer coach, I was a baseball coach. I understand the need for field use. My kids played high school sports. Some of my kids didn't even make it to the high school teams because they weren't good enough. So they actually needed the youth sports in order to help them with mental health and obesity and all those other issues that are all very important for kids to be able to use the fields. But you guys have an opportunity, right? An opportunity to actually think about the consequences and move forward with smart planning, smart field use, smart maintenance. So please do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Angelo. I know you mentioned a number of different boards and commissions, but with all due respect, nobody avoids responsibility better than the City Council. Anyone else looking to speak? Anyone? Okay, do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
No, there's someone online.
I apologize. Mr. Thompson. We are unable to hear you. I think you're still muted. But we will patiently wait as I fill time, avoiding the responsibility.
So sorry,
Okay,
so sorry.
no worries, go
I'm doing
ahead.
this on my phone and I couldn't get it to unmute. My name is Andrew Thompson. I'm 37 Ramlet Park in West Newton. I also teach at Newton South High School, and I think I was probably playing soccer on the grass field right next to Bert Gronowski when he was playing Ultimate at our college together. We're classmates. So I wanted to speak in support of this motion that the group has brought. I used to coach at Newton South. I've heard my student athletes talk about how the turf is at the end of its life, and I totally understand those concerns. I completely understand the importance of sports towards mental health. I've seen my kids' mental health deteriorate over the past few years. And I'm not necessarily saying a lot of new points here, but I am concerned that it is a false choice that people are putting, as someone said a couple of people ago, that we can be looking at different options, and to feel like we have to do this now or else our kids suffer thereafter. I really worry that's giving short shrift to the considerable environmental and health concerns that people raised at the beginning. And I worry if we just say, well, I don't know, we're going to have issues anyway. Just as a side point, we do recycle. We're increasingly working on recycling electrical batteries and electrical cars. My understanding is those can actually have a pretty long lifespan going forward. But I worry if we say, well, oh, well, there would be concerns, because we may be condemning our children to far longer concerns than these other extremely valid ones that people are talking about for mental health and other health concerns. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that same issue. I hear all those concerns, and I would encourage our group, the leaders here, to just pause on this decision and really hear more of the different alternatives. Thank you. And sorry for the pause earlier on.
No worries. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. So for the third time, I'm not seeing anybody else. But I feel like this time I'm really not seeing anybody else. So, committee members, is there a motion to close the public hearing? President Albright has moved to close the public hearing. Any discussion on that motion? All right, Programs and Services Committee members, all those in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you, and thank you to everyone who spoke. It was really well done. I enjoyed that public hearing. I think people kept their comments brief. People made new and interesting points. And I felt like every single person who spoke is very well intended, and I appreciate those comments. Committee members, we have item 4723 before us. We have several options. We can discuss it tonight. We can defer action to another night. We can discuss it and then defer action. President Albright.
So in response to many of the folks who spoke about the fact that all we need to do is find more grass fields and put more money into maintenance, this was part of the question that I asked at the beginning of the meeting. How many fields, how much land do we have that could be fields, and how much would it cost to maintain it? I think, that people are saying, let's find out what the real costs are and compare. So I think that's a reasonable request. How much fields do we have? How many acres of fields do we have that could be playable? And how much would it cost to maintain it? I think I need to know that. And Mr. Chairman, I do love your sense of humor, usually.
So you're the one. Terrific.
But tonight, saying that this is the place that avoids decisions, no. I don't like that particular joke.
Fair enough. Councilor Wright.
I'd like to follow on President Albright. One of the things in this petition, the first thing they asked is a comprehensive study of the demand for playing fields by school sports, youth sports, camps, and the general public, and the adequacy of the field scheduling system. I've heard a lot of comments and people questioning the field scheduling system, and it's not as efficient as it could be. So that kind of tails on about, you know, what do we need in the fields for what we have, and who's using it. And this is something we've been requesting for months now from Parks and Rec, and I haven't yet seen that. And that information I think would be extremely helpful.
Thank you, Councilor Wright. Any other councilors looking to weigh in here? Councilor Baker.
Mr. Chairman, it's no surprise I'm going to ask where we are in the sense we had a conversation in the committee and then I thought a vote in the council. And so do we have any capacity at this point to respond to this petition in any meaningful way, or is that decision made? That's at least for the fields that we heard about the other night.
Yeah, my understanding, and we can ask Commissioner Banks, who I think is still online, but my understanding is that the City Council approved the $3+ million to rehab the 2 turf fields. We were aware that this petition was out there, was going to be filed. I think there was a legal determination at that council meeting that the petition had not yet been properly filed, so we didn't actually have the petition before us, but we anticipated at that time that the petition would be filed. The petition was filed, and so we decided to move as quickly as possible on that petition so that if the council decided to approve the petition, hopefully we would have time to stop the rehab of those 2 turf fields, given that the Parks, Rec, and Culture department was going to have to put out an RFP, and there would be a process that was going to take place before the money was actually spent.
But if we've appropriated the funds and the commission, excuse me, Parks and Recreation Department has gone ahead with the bidding process, is there any leverage that the council literally has at this point other than to resolve something or in response to the petition? I don't want to mislead people who are here in good faith asking us to do something if we have nothing that we can do.
It's a question we can ask of legal.
Well, I think my sense is once an appropriation is passed, unless it's been somehow challenged successfully, the mayor has the authority to spend the money that the council has appropriated. So that doesn't mean that future expenditures couldn't be reviewed, but I guess myself at a loss about how we can respond to the petition in a sense of affecting the decision that the council already made a few weeks ago as regards to the request from Parks and Rec. So that's my puzzle.
Fair enough. Councilor Norton?
It's a great question, and that's why several of us had asked that the final city council vote be postponed until after this public hearing. We heard some very heartfelt, knowledgeable, thoughtful testimony tonight, and I'm sure it's disappointing to people to know that they have gone through all this trouble after we've already taken a vote. I actually even tried to charter the item in order to postpone the vote so that the information that we heard tonight could actually be used to help us make a more informed decision. So I just wanted the folks here to be aware that there was a procedural step that was taken in order to prevent your comments from happening before our final vote.
President Albright?
So I'm trying to, do we vote for to replace the fields at the 2 high schools? Was that the vote?
Yes, there was an appropriation request that came before the city council at, I forget if it was 1 or 2 city council meetings ago, and the city council approved it at that city council meeting.
So in the presentation that we heard tonight, there was a discussion of fields in addition to those in other places. I forget, Albemarle was one. I don't remember where the other ones were.
Newton North.
So it would make sense to at least do this research before we move forward. If nothing can be done with that appropriation that we've already approved, then at least we can have the research done before we move forward with any more.
So what I'm hearing is an interest to take an action, possibly on the petition, possibly not, but something similar to what the petition is requiring for future, before future turf proposals are approved.
What is the time frame for action on this particular petition?
90 days.
But when, from when? When's the end?
From when it was filed. I don't have that exact date. I don't know if Jacqueline has it, but it was...
It was filed on January 25th.
January, February, March, so we have until the end of March to make a...
Yes, I can pull up the exact date if you would like.
I think, Mr. Chairman, procedurally, though, it's the council that has to act, not just the committee, right? So the committee has to recommend if the council is to act within 90 days. So it means that, as I hear it, we have only 2 meetings in March in which to respond to the petition, correct?
I think that's right.
So,
Councilor Wright?
I have a question. So what happens if we don't get that far, you know, to have all this analysis in and things like that? I don't think the future turfs are going to be coming before March. Why can't we keep going with this?
I'm not understanding. Why can't we keep going with?
Well, this this is requesting some studies to be done. You know, I'm looking in front of us, there's 4 things: a comprehensive analysis of independent research, the total cost of natural grass versus artificial turf, and the scheduling and the fields and things like that. Technically, we're supposed to have this done in 90 days, which I don't think it's going to happen, but this information is going to be used maybe 6 months from now, 9 months from now, when Newton North comes up for replacement. And, you know, there's talk of putting an artificial turf in Albemarle and another one in Nonantum. I forget which park. But this will be good information for those fields. So I think we should move ahead with this and continue on. And I don't think there's much we can do about South, but for the other fields, this would be good information. And again, what they brought up is the state's looking at banning it too. And that might take a while yet to go through that, but in Connecticut, and there's a few other states too that are looking at that.
so, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Councilor Baker.
It strikes me that we have really a petition that some portion of it is in effect mooted by the decision the council made, but other portions, as the president indicated, are still possible for future expenditures. And I guess the question, we procedurally have 3 options when a petition is presented to us. We can vote to approve it, but there's an action in here I don't think literally we can take because we've already taken a piece of this. Second, we can vote to deny it. I've heard some concerns here that I think are worth responding to, so I'm not prepared to do that. Then the third option we have is something called no action necessary, which is not that this is irrelevant, but it is a procedural decision the council makes which says that the item is not denied, but is not something upon which the council can act at this point. It seems to me that might be procedurally the best response to this petition, but it seems also that the information that's presented should be in the minds of the members of the committee when the next request comes, as the president has indicated, for us to make an expenditure for further expenditure. The one other dimension, I think, that I just want to respond to people's legitimate concerns about the fields that we voted for. Several people tonight have talked about how the existing field is in great disrepair. And I think the challenge was that we did not have a good choice between replacing that field with grass and replacing it with artificial turf. I understood the choice that was before us was to replace a bad artificial turf or damaged or end of its useful life. I'm not sure exactly how you would describe it properly. but something that was beyond repair with something that would be better and less risky. It's not as riskless as grass fields, but the challenge also is there are other issues that people have pointed out about the importance of having access. So those are questions that I think we're going to have to return to when we look at these matters again. But I would welcome comments from our colleagues on the committee, but I think the only appropriate motion for this item would be no action necessary, with the explanation that that does not mean the matters that have been brought to us are by any means not worthy of consideration.
So are you making a motion that we approve no action necessary?
I'm prepared to do that at some point, but I wanted to hear from colleagues who might not have spoken.
Fair enough. President Albright?
So I'd be willing to go along with that if we docket tomorrow. I mean, we can docket our own item asking for the information that Councilor Wright and I've been asking for, and I'm sure you're interested in, and so that we can carry on the conversation outside the realm of this particular hearing. So I would go along with no action necessary as long as we take our own action and move the conversation forward.
Councilor Wright?
I'm worried if we do that, that all this information that's in here, are we putting all of that on the docket item?
We can decide that.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Ryan, are you looking to speak as well?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, so the fields at Newton South are the ones we voted on and approved, correct?
That's correct.
And that's done. That's a done deal, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and moving forward, one of the things we can do is get more research on like the fields that Parks, Recs, and Culture wants to put in at Albemarle and I believe Brown. I mean, I have to agree with Councilor Baker. For tonight, it's no action necessary. I had comments on what I believe, but I think I'll hold that off for a bigger city council meeting. But just so we know that and everybody online knows that the Newton South fields we did vote to replace, but I'm all for looking at more information going forward. Thanks.
Councilor Humphrey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councilor Albright and Ryan on what they just said. I'm happy to be a co-docketer on a new, properly constructed docket item. And because I have a lot of concerns as well about the possible expansion of new turf fields, which I think is a slightly different issue than what we already took up. And we've heard a lot of good, helpful comments tonight. Of course, there's a lot of other, countervailing comments that were also brought up by other folks who had their own concerns about the usage issues and just, how do we balance all of these different factors. And I think the presentation from the parks folks was very helpful at the top, especially for emphasizing what goes into the maintenance of the non-synthetic fields, because that didn't come up too much tonight in the hearing, but that has been a concern in its own right behind the scenes over the past several years. There's been a lot of questions about pesticide and herbicide usage on the grass fields and what the environmental consequences of those are. And we've been talking a lot about phosphorus and things like that this week and last week in council. So there's a lot to look at, but I'm mostly not inclined toward expanding new synthetic turf fields. So I do think we're going to need a new docket item to continue working on this issue.
So Mr. Chairman, I'm based on the conversation in committee, I'm going to move no action necessary, but I think it's hard to frame the docket item in the meeting tonight, but I suspect that the president and several people in the committee can take some of the information in this petition and some of the questions that have been raised, including what advances there are, as Councilor Humphrey is essentially asking, I think, in maintenance procedures for grass fields. which is certainly a part of the question that we've been asked to explore, and the whole question of access and equity that goes into that. So there's a lot to sort of sort out, but I should just say in making that motion for those people online and who are here, this is the council's role ultimately is limited in the sense that we approve appropriations or not that the mayor has asked for. We are not the executive department, so we have to be, we can review and ask questions, but there's also a very important role that the executive plays here, and that's not our responsibility, but we can ask the executive to demonstrate the need and the thought that's gone into what decisions that are made. So I just want to clarify that there's a division of authority that we have to respond to. But with that, I'll move NAN with the explanation that I hope will give those who've taken the trouble to come tonight and testify on both sides some sense that their time has been well spent, notwithstanding the procedural motion that's coming out of the committee, and then will ultimately taken up by the council.
Councilor Baker has moved no action necessary. Any discussion on that motion? Councilor Wright.
I'm just worried if we do no action necessary and we're going to docket an item that it may be watered down from what this petition is requesting. So I am not going to vote for it, but I think it will survive. And I just want to point out too, on the fields, the money for the fields on South, it did pass in the city council, but it wasn't 100%. There are some people who voted against it. Thank you.
Councilor Ryan.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up that we had a lot of people against the synthetic fields, but we also had a lot of people that were for the fields or for sports, outdoor sports. So, I mean, I caught the presentations on Zoom, and then I ran over here to City Hall and be in person. But since I've been here, I was keeping score, so to speak, and there were 10 people that spoke in favor of the fields of the artificial turf. So I don't want it to look like it was totally one way or the other. And we're here to listen to everybody. And everybody has a right to speak because they're residents of our city and their kids use the fields or are not going to use the fields. So I just want to bring that up. Thanks.
Any other discussion on the motion, which is no action necessary? President Albright.
Yeah, I just want to say for the benefit of all sides that this is an extremely complex problem, because even if the Parks and Rec Department comes and says we have enough land and it will cost us an extra $1.5 million a year to maintain, I mean, then you have to start balancing an extra $1.5 million to the Parks and Rec Department versus maintaining roads and sidewalks and schools and so forth. So I think as Mr. Rinaldi said, it would be great to have the data, because then we can make an informed choice. So that's what I'm interested in, an informed choice.
Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, Councilor Baker has moved NAN. All those in favor of NAN, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed?
Me.
One opposed, Councilor Wright. Any abstentions? Okay, that motion carries 6-1 with one councilor absent. That is our last item of the night. With that,
Did we hold the earlier item, the one from previously?
Yes, we unanimously held the field maintenance plan item.
All right.
Is that what you're asking about, Councilor Humphrey?
Yes, thank you.
Yep. With that, we can adjourn, and I will see you all in March. Have a good break next week, everybody.